A huge weather pattern change will be coming to the United States in early January, and this is going to bring the potential for a few different winter storms that'll bring lots of snowfall to the United States. In addition to that, big Arctic blasts are coming, which is going to bring frigid cold to a large chunk of the country, and many areas could even dive below 0 degrees by the middle of January. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about this weather pattern that'll be impacting the United States over the next couple of weeks, and we'll begin with what's happening across the country today. And right now we have a huge storm back over on the east coast of the United States. This actually brought some significant severe weather only a couple of days ago to areas in the Dixie Alley and the lower Mississippi Valley, but overall it is now moving off to the north and east. It'll be moving out of the United States later today. Behind this, there is some colder weather that's moving into areas like the Ohio Valley and up and down the east coast. In addition to that, a little bit of snowfall will fall in the Great Lakes over the next few hours before that eventually moves into Canada, and then also some rain will be pushing into areas like the Northeast, and many areas this morning back over in New England are waking up to record-breaking high low temperatures. What I mean by that is they are basically dealing with some very warm low temperatures this morning that are breaking records, so pretty crazy stuff there. And further back to the west, we are actually going to have another little system come over the Rocky Mountains and into areas like the Midwest later today and into tomorrow, and this will bring a little bit of snowfall to areas like the Midwest and as well as the Central Plains. And then eventually, as we go into New Year's Day and as well as forwarding that, we are going to start to see the potential for some significant lake effect snow back over near the Great Lakes. Now, the weather pattern that we've been dealing with in the United States has been really based off of a very strong Pacific jet stream, which has basically meant that we're not seeing any cold air coming out of Canada because the jet stream winds have been very westerly. But things are going to change though as we go into early to mid-January, because what we're going to be seeing is a huge dip in the jet stream at least a couple of times, I think, in the first 2 weeks of January. And the first dip that we are going to see will actually be at the end of this week. Now, this one's not going to be a huge one. It's actually going to be, I would say, a smaller dip in the jet stream, but it will bring below average temperatures, because notice the jet stream will actually be coming more out of the northwest here, which means that we're going to see some cold air coming out of Canada, but it's not really going to be the biggest one that we're going to see, I think, over the next couple of weeks, because as we go into the following week, eventually by Monday and Tuesday around January 7th, notice this, a huge dip out of the north here across the Rocky Mountains and also through the Great Plains, with a big dip in the jet stream. In addition to that, a trough just located to the northeast of those northerly winds. So this could combine a potential for not just cold air, but also the potential for a big winter storm. So I definitely think things are going to get very active as we go into the first couple of weeks of January. And then after that, we're likely to continue to see a weather pattern very similar to that. The GFS model indicating that that dip of the jet stream that's coming out of Canada with all that Arctic air flowing north to south could continue for potentially several days, maybe even upwards of a week, before we actually see some big changes back to being above average for temperatures. With all that said, big Arctic blasts are coming in the first couple of weeks here of January. This is going to be a look here as we go into the end of this week. We're going to get our first shot of cold air across areas like the northern plains, Midwest, and as well as the Northeast. Overall, this one again is not going to be that significant. It'll just be somewhat below average temperatures. We're not really talking about any records being broken here by the end of this week. Things do change though as we go into the weekend and eventually into early next week. That's when we think we'll have two things, one of which being the potential for a winter storm in areas like the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, and behind that we'll be talking about the potential for Arctic air. Now again, this is about 7 to 8 days out, so the position of this could change a little bit, but we do think we're going to see our first shot of big Arctic air as we go into next week, so sometime around Monday into Tuesday. And notice how this goes as far south as areas like Texas, Arkansas, back into Tennessee, even dives into the southeast. And if this ends up happening, we could be talking about below freezing temperatures even into areas like Florida right around Wednesday and Thursday, which would be about January 8th and January 9th. And then eventually, as we go into the following weekend, things definitely become more uncertain here, but it does appear as if we are going to be dealing with quite the cold pattern here to begin January. This is also the European model indicating a very similar trend here, but this model actually goes more aggressive on the first Arctic blast that we'll be seeing, which is right around January 7th and 8th. And you'll notice right behind the first one, we got a second shot of cold air that's even more intense, and this would bring the threat for record-breaking temperatures across areas like the Central Plains, the Midwest, and perhaps even into areas like the Southeast. Now again, there is some uncertainty here obviously because the GFS model and the European model not showing the same intensity with the Arctic blast, but it's definitely important to note here that there could be a couple of different scenarios here. GFS leaning towards a slightly less cold weather pattern, but even then the GFS model is still indicating some very frigid weather as we wake up a little over a week from now on January January 8th, indicating that we could see some sub-zero temperatures and even a freezing line that goes as far south as areas near Houston, Texas. So this will definitely again be something to watch for as we go into next week. Now I do want to point out again that this is still about 10 days from now, so there will definitely be some changes to the forecast. Exactly how strong this Arctic blast is and exactly where it positions the coldest weather is still uncertain, but we are again thinking that there's at least growing confidence right now that we are going to be talking about some very frigid weather. The European model is on board, by the way, with the same sort of scenario, slightly less cold, at least on the January 8th time frame. It actually indicates much colder weather a little bit beyond that, indicating sometime around January 11th that below freezing temperatures and even below zero temperatures would be happening across the Ohio Valley and maybe as far south as Arkansas. But again, I want to point out again, this is a very distant forecast. We can't really put much stock into this right now because it is just still well over 10 days from now. Now, as we go into January, we do think there's going to be a pretty good amount of snow because we're going to be talking about a couple of different winter weather events over the next 7 to 10 days, and then we're likely to see more after that. This is the latest from the Climate Prediction Center on an extended outlook in terms of the risk of heavy snowfall between January 4th to January 10th, and they are already indicating that there's a slight risk of that all the way from the Rocky Mountains into the Central Plains, Ohio Valley, back into the Northeast, and as well as back over in parts of the Great Lakes region. I would also say there's really more of a high risk here back over near Lake Erie and Lake Ontario because there's going to be some big lake effect snowfall as we go into the first week of January. So let's put this more into perspective with the future radar, and let me show you what I'm confident in seeing in terms of snowfall for the next several days, and also what I'm not nearly as confident in. So right now, we are going to be dealing with a little storm here over the next 48 hours that's going to be moving across the Central Plains and eventually into the Midwest. This will bring some light to moderate snowfall to areas like Nebraska, maybe even back into Iowa tonight, and then eventually as we go into tomorrow morning, a little bit of snow is possible on the northern side of this trough, back over in Michigan and perhaps back over in northern Indiana and Ohio. But overall, this is not going to be a big winter storm event, but it's actually going to get a little bit interesting because as we go into the first couple of days of January, on the back side of this trough, it's actually going to be an intensifying low pressure system, which will bring the threat for some lake effect snow across Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, and even back over in parts of northern Michigan. We'll be seeing some snowfall in the first few days of January, and it's going to be potentially pretty significant. Back over near Lake Ontario, for example, we could be talking about several days of lake effect snow because look at how this trough literally just spins up here north of New England, and if that ends up happening, we could be talking about a northwesterly wind, which is very prime, by the way, for bringing the threat for some very significant lake effect snow. So potentially 4 to 5 days of lake effect snow will be coming up as we go into the first few days of January. And then by this upcoming weekend, I have about an 80% confidence that we are going to be talking about some sort of large winter storm in the United States. Right now, the GFS model indicating that we could have a big time winter storm with the potential for freezing rain, sleet, snow in areas like the Midwest, the central northern plains, the Ohio Valley, and eventually back through the Northeast on Sunday and Monday. Now, confidence is increasing that we are going to be talking about some sort of big time winter storm sometime again around Sunday or Monday. Here's the thing, we got two things to talk about here. The first of which, we can't really get into specific details here because this is around 7 days out. Things always change in the weather world, especially on computer models. We could easily see this much further north or south, or we could also see it weaker or stronger. There's a lot of different scenarios right now that we're talking about with something like this, and there's still again a 20 to 30% chance, I would say, of us not seeing a big winter storm here around again the first weekend of January. Now, with all that said, I am personally confident that we are going to be seeing something in terms of a winter storm, and I do think that we are going to be dealing with some pretty heavy snow in a lot of areas, but again, where exactly this sets up and how intense it is are all again very uncertain at this point. I also want to point out, with a storm like this, we could easily see some sort of severe weather with it, so areas like the Dixie Alley might want to be staying at least somewhat aware that there might be some sort of issue there around Sunday or Monday. In addition to that, the European model is showing the same sort of confidence right now that we are going to see some sort of winter storm. European model is even stronger than the GFS, so it just gives you an idea here, right in the same time frame, by the way. It gives you an idea that there could again be a pretty big time winter storm here during the first week of January. Now, beyond the first week, things do become a lot more uncertain. I mean, the European model showing snow back over in Houston. I'm going to be honest with you, again, this is just kind of something that computer models seem to spit out around this time of the year, that it shows a ridiculous scenario where we could see snow near Houston. I'm not saying it's not going to happen or it's never happened before. It's just, again, a very low chance at this point. If you see something like that on social media where it shows snow in Florida and it's a 7+ day forecast, just don't buy it, because again, it's almost undoubtedly not going to happen. And if a computer model is showing the snowfall accumulation over 7 days out, again, there's a pretty good chance it's not going to happen. Now, in terms of total snowfall accumulation over the next few days, again, we're going to have that little snowmaker here across across areas like the central and northern plains and perhaps back over into the Great Lakes. Again, a few inches of snow possible out of this. Nothing really too significant. There will be a few spots near maybe a foot back over in northern Nebraska, but that's really about it. Not a significant snowfall maker. Here's where things get a lot more interesting, though. Again, when that winter storm that we just talked about comes into play sometime around this upcoming weekend, we could be talking about a widespread 6 to 18 inches of snowfall if it ends up happening. Again, there's still a bit of an if factor since it's not really set in stone yet, since it's a little over 7 days out from now. But again, confidence is increasing that we're going to see something. Where the heaviest snowfall falls and all that sort of stuff is very uncertain. The European model, once again, is much more aggressive. It shows a much more significant amount of snowfall in some areas, like 2 to 3 feet of snow. Again, I'm not buying that yet because we just don't have enough information here since it's still over 7 days out. One thing I will point out, though, we're more confident that we're going to be seeing some significant lake effect snow in New York over the next several days, and we could easily see feet of snow back over near areas like Watertown, New York, and also just south of Buffalo. And as always, thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We do daily forecasts on this channel, and as well as make sure to like the video. Also, just a quick announcement, our Happy Holidays collection on shopmaxvelocity.net is going to be going away tomorrow, so your last chance to pick this up will be tomorrow. It will return next season more than likely, whether it's in this form or a different form. We'll have to wait and see, but we'll have another collection like this next Christmas, so definitely make sure to go check this out. Again, we got several different items, shopmaxvelocity.net, and also our flying trampoline merch is still out there, and we got our poster as well that just released recently. A lot of you guys are picking that up, Drunk NATO merch, and as well as the Max Velocity collection, and it is the top link in the description below, shopmaxvelocity.net.